So, here we are, excuse me, sorry. Here we are at the end of Disc 5. This is Season 5, Disc 5, Episode 220. So we're moving on to the next disc in the next episode here. But welcome to the D. Louise book series. It's nice to meet you. I'm Christina K, Ristina. This is where we read books and talk about books. No special effects going on here. What you see is what you get. And unfortunately, we have a computer that's being held together by a binder clip. So if any of you have a laptop out there where the bottom is falling out, this works really good. However, you need to keep something under it because it will scratch your tables. So you have to keep something under it, but it holds it really good and tight. So try that. I suggest it. It's been almost 6 months now. It's been working out great. But we still have the poor lighting and the poor audio and the poor everything. But that's what we got to deal with. So anyways, welcome to the D. Louise book series. Like I said before, this is where we read books and talk books. I'm a series person. We are currently doing J.R. Ward's Black Dagger Brotherhood, Victoria Thompson's Gaslight series, and I keep saying Alex Cross. It's James Patterson's Alex Cross series. Please check out all my others. I do daily book reviews, so please check those out. And we have a weekly Star Trek Next Generation recaps. And this afternoon, please check out If Then. If you like this author, then maybe you like that author. I've worked really hard on these episodes. There's a couple that no one has watched. So if you like Black authors, please go check out my If Then for Black authors. I got so many different varieties of vampire and contemporary romance and sci-fi, and no one has watched that one. And I've got one on Native American detectives, Tony Hillerman types. And I have found some more since, and now I'm mad at myself because I found these after I did the video. But anyways, let's get back on course here. This is Star Trek Next Generation Fridays. We did 217, The Outcast, 218, Cause and Effect, 219. We had Wesley Crusher return, Will Reedon. And now we are doing The Cost of Living with Majel Barrett. The woman gets to come back and do all her stuff. So let's sit back and enjoy this interesting episode. Where is... I wish that we could just run the episode and, run it through, but there are copyright issues, so we can't do that. But that's how I would like to do this, but we can't do that. Okay, so we start the video show in the middle of some action here. Apparently, they are blowing up an asteroid that is heading towards this planet. They are in full red alert. Picard says, Worf says, forward torpedoes armed and ready, Captain. Picard says, fire. Worf says, direct hit. Data says the asteroid has shattered, however, the core is still intact and on a collision course with Tessin 3. Riker says it's big enough to cause a threat. Data says yes, it's sufficient size and density to cause planet-wide damage. Time to impact, Picard asks. Data says it will reach the upper atmosphere in 44 seconds and impact on the planet 11 seconds later. Riker says, ready torpedoes. Worf says, aye, sir. Data says the core is composed of tritium and crandite. It is unlike another photon torpedo will be any of effect. Picard says, Mr. Worf, prepare a tractor beam. Aye, sir. 30 to impact. Captain, I am unable to get a positive lock with the tractor beam. There is magnetic interference emanating from the core material. Worf says, Picard says, activate a deflector dish. If we project a particle beam, we may be able to produce a disruptor nuclear effect within the core. Aye, sir. Impact in 17 seconds, data says. Particle beam activated. The target has been destroyed, Captain. The remaining debris is of no threat to the planet, sir. Well done, everyone. Ensign, put us back on course for Moselina Warp 4 as soon as we're clear of the debris field. However, now because I have a poor camera, I have a co-host for 10 seconds. You can't really see it, but right here, there's some energy particles going into the ship after they've finished with the asteroid. So I just wanted to show that. I don't know how much you can see, but it's right there. So when we return from opening credits, Worf and Alexander are getting a counseling session from Troy. Apparently there's some trouble in the Worf family. My instructions were clear, Worf says. They were not, Alexander says. Worf says before he was allowed to play, he was to place his soiled clothing in the garment processor. I was not, Alexander says. I sense a touch of hostility here, gentlemen. Worf says you were specifically told that. Alexander says you told me that yesterday. You didn't tell me that today. Troy says, if I may suggest, you know very well the same rules apply today, Worf says. Troy says, please, why not simply draw up a contract what clearly defines the duties of each family member? Alexander says, you mean he tells me what he wants and I have to do it? No, I mean you both agree to your responsibilities, and when you've done the things you've agreed to, then you've earned the privilege to do the things that you want to do. When he's cleaned his room, for instance, then perhaps he's earned a visit to the holodeck to fight his alien monsters. You suggest theory, Worf says. I suggest working on an equitable system with rules clearly spelled out for the child and the parent. You must make a list of your responsibilities too. What would you like your father to promise, Alexander? No yelling. I do not yell, Worf says. Well then, you should have no trouble with that part. Why not go back to your quarters and talk things over? Decide on which points of each of you wants in the contract. Very well, Worf says. Troy says, one day you'll learn to be glad your father cared enough about you to insist on rules. It may be hard to imagine right now, but you'll eventually, most children come to appreciate their family. And they leave. And then Riker to Troy. We have to just assume the computer is not going to broadcast their conversation anywhere else in the whole ship. But Riker to Troy, your mother has arrived. So Lwaxana comes on the transporter with Mr. Hun. I've got such deliciously exciting news. You're going to be absolutely thrilled. I'm getting married, she says. Then Lwaxana they're in 10 forward, and she's saying, with just a bit of redecorating here and there, this 10 forward room should make a very nice wedding hall. Troy says, I beg your pardon? Where else, my little one, but here amongst all my good friends and in the presence of my adored daughter? Mother, when did you meet this man? Who is he? I mean marriage? When did this all happen? My poor plodding little Deanna with her questions. Wherever did you inherit such pedestrian genes? What matters, my little one, is that your mother is happy. Or is she? Mother, if you're happy, then I'm happy for you. I only ask who he is and where you met him. Those are the not unusual questions. Listen, he's a wonderful man. He has such good breeding. I tell you, he's absolute perfection. Who is he? He's Campino, third minister to the Conference of Judges on the planet Castellano. Royalty, my little one, naturally. Naturally, I don't know you'd ever been to Castellane. Or was he on some diplomatic mission to Beta's dead? Well, neither, actually. You see, we haven't actually met yet. Oh, the profiles we exchanged, why, they're in such accord that you would weep, my little one. You would weep at the harmony between us. A dating app. She has a dating app. eHarmony and the rest of them exist in this century, and she used a dating app. She couldn't use the data zap on Betazoid and find another Betazoid to get together with, or somebody on Earth, or God forbid, Jean-Luc Picard. She used a dating app. She absolutely used a dating app. And she's gonna get not what she wants. At all. At all. At all. Sorry. It's not. It's not good. Mother, don't you think it would be a good idea if you actually met the man before you uh, before committing to spend the rest of your life with him? Yeah, it would. It would really, to meet somebody in person, to know that their dating picture was acceptable and have the real, you know how people phishing happens. You use your child or son or some photo you got off the internet somewhere as your photo to entice somebody who may or may not also be using a not their photo. I'm telling you, Diana, I love you, but you do make everything sound like an epitaph. And then we have company. So then Alexander and Worf come in. Alexander says, I don't want to agree. Worf says, but you have to agree. That is an agreement. Counselor Troy, excuse the intrusion, but we're having some difficulty drawing up our contract, Mrs. Troy. He's not fair, Alexander says. He's not reasonable, Worf says. Lwaxana says, well, of course he's unreasonable. He's a child. And such child, making little boys responsible only gives them pimples. Oh, she's always going off. See my New Year's Eve video, 30 for her identity. Well, of course he's unreasonable. He's a child, and such a child, making little boys reasonable only gives them pimples. That sounds like something Mrs. Ellsworth would say. If you've seen my Victoria Thompson videos. Alexander, this is my mother. Alexander, what a wonderful name. I once knew a tall, handsome warrior named Alexander. Oh, he utterly adored me. We went everywhere. Simply everywhere. Have you been anywhere yet? Contract? What contract? Between father and son, a fair and well-balanced way to achieve a mutual sense of order, Troy says. Well, how ghastly for you. And you're doing this to your own child? Mr. Worf, he says. Contracts are unusual between people who don't trust each other. A child is trusted becomes worthy of that trust. Mother, will you kindly stay out of this? Lwaxana, if he does not perform his contractual duties, I assume he will be chastised. Yes, he will be sanctioned, Worf says. And if you fail to perform your duties, what is the child supposed to do about it? Mother, please, Troy says. Not perform my duty, Worf says. Alexander, now life's true gift is the capacity to enjoy enjoyment. Now I've arrived too late, or can you still smile? And he goes like this. He fakes a smile. He's too much. And then, so then we have Picard and Riker in the hallway. Picard says, married? She's getting married? Riker says, yes, if we stay on our present course, we should rendezvous with her intended groom in 31 hours. I will not have that woman continue to use this ship for her convenience, simply because her daughter happens to be one of my officers. Riker says, apparently Deanna being on board is only part of the reason. The other reason? She thinks the honor of giving away the bride should fall on you. Permission for onboard wedding is granted, number one. Nothing would please me more than to give away Miss Troy. And then, okay, so after they walk down the hallway, this goopy stuff comes out of the ceiling. I don't know how well you can see it on my computer, my adequate computer, but I hope you can see it. So then the next scene is Alexander playing in Troy's office waiting for Troy. Apparently he's arrived a few minutes early because he wants to avoid his father. Mrs. Troy walks in and sees him playing, and she's, said it's very responsible of him for showing up early. And he said, no, I just wanted to be out of my room before. Before what? She says. Now, if we're going to be real friends, we've got to share the truth. Why? Well, for one thing, it's easier. When you tell the truth, you never have to remember later what you lied about. But mostly a true friend is a person you can always tell the truth to without worrying about it. Alexander says, I wanted to leave before my father got back. Oh, Lwaxana says, I hate him. I wish my mother was here, but she's dead. That's not very fair, is it? All he cares about are rules. I'm supposed to do everything right all the time. I don't know how. To tell you the truth, Lwaxana says, little warrior, neither do I. But I do know one marvelous thing we can do with the rules. I'm supposed to wait for Counselor Troy. Exactly, she says. And they leave. So then she takes him to the holodeck. Lwaxana says, I bet you've never been to a colony of tree spirits. What do they do there? Whatever they want. Artists, philosophers, free thinkers, and people who don't quite fit in other people's rules. Personally, I come for the mud bath. Oh, you're going to adore the mud bath. Computer, I'm assuming you have the Prolax colony of Charlotte 6. The computer says the program is available. And she's like, good, then run it for us, dear, after she's tapping all over the screen. So then they go in the holodeck and they're greeted by this guy who makes funny faces. She calls him a wind dancer. He guards, you see, only those hearts are joyous may enter. Come on in. Then they see a fire breather who breathe a protocol 5-star. And fire sculptor will chat later with her if you're not wearing anything flammable. And then they meet a juggler who's juggling his worlds, who has an issue later. We'll get to that. Lwaxana says, actually, we're about to experience the mud bath. Juggler, were you? What an idea. My friends and I will join you. One can always laugh in a bath. So then they go to the people that were going, yes, no, yes, no, yes, no. And they meet a poet who keeps going, the higher the fewer, whatever that means. And Worf is cleaning up his apartment. And then Troy comes in looking for Alexander, and Worf says, I thought Alexander was with you. And she said, well, I came here to get him, so he's not there either. So then they go, computer, where is Alexander? And they say he is on the holodeck with Lwaxana Troy. And that makes both their days. So Lwaxana and Alexander are in a med bath and they're watching this girl in a skin suit, or is it a skin suit, do this dance. And I'm like, this is a family show, people. But they're all enjoying the mud bath and they're all enjoying the entertainment. Until Worf and Deanna come in and break it up. Lwaxana was telling Troy Alexander that, of course, every one of us has 1,000 different people inside us. And some of them want to get out and be wild. Some want to be sad or happy or inventive. Or just go dancing. That's why we all have so many different urges at different times. And all those different little people inside us must never be afraid to take them with us wherever they go. I mean, who knows when we may need one of them to pop out and rescue us from ourselves. Variety, my little Alex, the great secret is not the variety of life, it's the variety of us. And then, of course, Troy and Wolf break this up. So then Troy and her mother are back in her quarters. And Troy's like, Mother, I'm trying to help the boy learn the value of responsibility. You're not helping by giving him a lot of mixed messages. I exposed you to all sorts of mixed messages when you were that age. You still turned out deadly dull. What are you so worried about? Among other things, his relationship with his father. No more holodeck, Mother, please. Why aren't you all absorbed in your wedding plans? It's only 3 days away. I'm letting Mr. Hahn take all of the mundane details. He knows my taste. Mother! Deanna, there's absolutely nothing to do, you little nosy girl. Campbell's already sent me his mother's wedding gown, which Mr. Hahn is now altering for me. Outside of that, there really isn't anything else. Wedding gown, Troy says? Mother, stop. You're telling me you're not going to be naked at your own wedding? Campbell is from a different planet with different traditions. He would not approve of a traditional Beta Z wedding. So I'm happily adapting. Now, it's as simple as that. I need some tea. And she tries to get some tea out of the replicator, and that's a whole nother issue. Troy's got to go, because her mother in previous episodes is always giving her entire rank, and in this one she doesn't say it at all. The mother doesn't say it at all, but Troy's got to say it. I can't believe hearing this from the heir to the holy rings of Beta Z, holder of the sacred chalice. And then of course the replicator, and it doesn't work, and it's really bad. So then we're down in engineering, and Data and Geordi are discussing the issue. Data's saying a level 4 diagnostic of the food replication system has failed to detect any faults in the orientation terminals. Geordi says that may be, but we've still got over 200 reports of malfunctioning replicators. Data says there's an energy fluctuation in one of the utility access corridors. Well, we better go look into whatever it is before the captain decides to order dinner. So then Geordi and Data are in the Jeffries tube. And she says, yes, -64. Here we are, some kind of intermittent EM field pattern. Give me a hand with that, will you? And they take down the lid. There's no plasma leak. It's just a little negative ion charging. And then this glop falls on the roof, the roofing tile that they bring in. So then we're in Lwaxana's quarters, and she's got this full white dress on, really high collar, really long sleeves to the floor. And she hates it, and she's dyed her hair for this one moment in the show only. The rest of the show, so we're going to assume it's a wig, because the rest of the entire show, it's her own black hair again. So obviously it's just a wig for this 5 minutes period of time. Mr. Hahn looks on silently as usual. Lwaxana says, bad enough having to wear anything at my own wedding, but this, perhaps if we lower the bodice, raise the hemline. And he's like, no, and she's like, no, and he's like, no, and so then Alexander comes in, and it's a cute little scene. So Alexander, my little warrior, come here, come on, give me a great big hug. Now you're not escaping another appointment, are you? No, ma'am. Well, I suppose everything will have to live up to our obligations now. Tell me, what brings you here to lighten my day? I wanted to say I'm sorry if I got you in any trouble. Lwaxana said, that's very sweet, dear, but I really wasn't in any trouble until I saw this dress. What's it for? I'm getting married. Why? Are you sure my daughter didn't send you? Just a joke. People get married because they want to spend their lives with someone. Their whole life? They must have to like a person a lot. Alexander says, well, if you're young and lucky, it would be someone you like a lot, yes. And if you're older? Are you old? I'm alone, Alex. And when you get older and can no longer pick and choose from whatever you may come your way, then you do what call a compromise. It keeps you from being afraid. And there are many senior dating situations out there, and there are many social groups now. I would hope that there would be many social groups. She's a very social person. I don't understand why she would have trouble meeting a guy on Beta Z or any planet and meet them in person. This is horrible that she did the dating app. It's just horrible. So then we're back on the bridge again, and Data says we've traced the failure to a DataNet interface, which routes replicator selections to the correct subprocessor. When we opened the panel, we discovered that the interface had been transformed into a gelatinous material that we haven't been able to identify, Jordy says. Then they have some shifts, stuff goes on, the shift shakes and stuff goes on, alarms goes off. We have intermittent failure of the inertial dampening system, Worf says. Picard says, take us out of warp. Primary attitude control has failed, going to secondary systems, Riker says. We have lost helm control, Data says. Try a manual bypass of the dampening systems, Riker says. Data says, aye, sir. Picard says, backup generators. Coming online now, Geordi says. How long before we regain altitude control? We're almost there. And they shake a few more times and then they stop. Picard says, Ensign, put us back on course. Let us stay at impulse for now. Did something hit us, Mr. Worf? Negative, sir. The inertial dampener shouldn't fail without kicking in the automatic bypass. I want to know what went wrong. Analysis in 30 minutes, Picard says. Okay, so Geordi comes in and he shows him the glob. So he's in the room with Picard, Geordi, Data, and Riker. Geordi says the same thing that happened to Replicator happened to the stabilizer. The transfers in both systems were turned into this. Some kind of corrosion, Riker asked. We have not yet identified the substance, Commander. Whatever it is, it looks like there's been a conversion process, transforming some of the metal into the gelatinous residue. But what caused it is a mystery. Replicators and stabilizers, two totally unrelated systems, Picard says. Yes, sir, and we still don't know why the sensors didn't pick up the problems. Yes, sir, let's run a mass spectra analysis and find out what this stuff is. And then the transporter people contact Picard that Minister Campio has beamed on board. And he's very, very rigid. There's no touching, there's no kissing, there's no handshaking. And this gentleman here gives him all the rules, tells him what he cannot do, strict ethical procedures. It's just a mess. Poor Lwaxana is trying to be friendly and open, and the guy's just a rigid statue. She's like, oh dear, your profile didn't do your picture justice. I'm Lwaxana and happy to compliments to make you a loyal received. And she's all out there flowing and all this stuff. And he's just very, very rigid. No touching, no handshaking, nothing. Indeed, Mrs. Troy, you are lovelier in person. Now that worked just fine. She moves to kiss Campo, but his aide goes like this. No, you can't kiss. Now we just don't wish to be too familiar at this early stage. And then Picard enters the room. And Picard's like, and his hand just stands there, and the guy just bows like that. He doesn't touch Picard at all. There's no touching here at all. No touching. And it just, he goes, touching is unpardonable. Like, okay, Lwaxana knows she's in trouble now. So then Geordi and Data are at the science station on the bridge. Well, it looks like the only ally common to both replicator and stabilizer is Nitrium. Computer analyze the Nitrium comment of the both affected stabilizers and replicator, Geordi says. Computer says there is no nitrogen present in the affected stabilizer replicator. Data says there's none present in the residue either. Jody says, according to the mass spectrometer, the elements in the residue have broken down into simpler molecule structures. Data says that would suggest the nitrogen has been organically metabolized. Maybe that's it, Data. Maybe it's a living organism that ingested the nitrogen. Data says this residue would be the waste left behind. If that's true, it's something eating away at the nitrogen on our ship. That means that the lithium chamber is vulnerable as well as the power conduits. We better get to engineering. And then they hurry along. And we're having behavioral issues with Alexander again. He's doing his ha for laughing hour. Ha and ha. And it's just frustrating the life out of Worf. And he would like his son to eat his meal. And his son doesn't want no part of eating his meal. He has promised Mrs. Troy that they would go for another lesson in happy wisdom. Ha. And they have this give and take. And Alexander ends up just walking out. So then we have a really large incident here. We'll try and get over it. I don't wish to be authoritative, my dear, but Mr. Echo says that now is the proper time for discussion of certain details. Lwaxana says, well, I don't wish to be considered anti-Urko, dear, but I did promise Alexander one more holodeck trip. Come along, and they start to leave. And Campuyo says, surely there will be other occasions for you to spend time with the boy. Lwaxana says, my goodness, Campuyo, you and I are going to have the rest of our lives. I'll tell you what, I'll be back here with you in an hour. And Urko says, Minister, the woman should not be addressing you in this familiar manner. And then Troy and Worf come to see them. And they get into another little bit of an argument. Lwaxana is desperately trying to get out of the room. And everybody is giving her grief about it. So when everybody gets mixed up in the arguing and everybody's attention is focused on everybody else, Lwaxana and Alexander escape because Campo is just giving out all these rules and Urko's giving out all these rules, and Lwaxana's like, she knows she's over her head. She knows that this guy is not for her. She needs to come out and say it, but she doesn't know how to do it. So she and Alexander just split. And everybody else in the room is busy arguing. So then we're back in the holodeck, and the poor guy he was the juggler, and he was juggling, and one of his worlds fell in his mouth, and it was really delicious, so he ate it. So he was juggling and another one, and he ended up eating all his worlds. He has no worlds left. He's very depressed. We're in engineering, and all the alarms are going off. Jody says, once we saw the photonic trail moving through the wall, we realized we must be dealing with a metal parasite of some kind. We believe the parasites came through the ship's hull after we destroyed the asteroid near Tessin 3, Data says. Are they attacking anything other than the Nitrum alloy, Picard says? No, sir, they're not. That we can tell. But we've got Nitrum everywhere. The computers, the life support, the ventilation engines, even the dilithium chamber. Mr. Data, the asteroid we destroyed, that was rich in Nitrum. Yes, sir. And that asteroid came from the Polaris field. If the rest of the field is rich with Nitrum, it would make a natural feeding ground. Jordy says we should think about going back there. The parasites could possibly be lured to the asteroids for a meal that's more appealing than we are. Mr. Data, how long to the field? Picard asks. Warp 9, 5 hours, 20 minutes, sir. Picard to bridge. Riker here, sir. Set a course for Polaris Astrofield Warp 9. Aye, sir, Riker says. Captain, with our sensors unable to detect the parasites and given the speed with which they appear to be moving through the ship, Data says, we may not have 5 hours, 20 minutes. I'm aware of that. How can we slow them down? Data says, in several cases, oxygen gas barrier has been known to slow the process of metal parasites. They don't like cold, eh? Make it so. The problem is finding them. As soon as we spot an energy fluctuation, they've already consumed all the nitrogen and moved on. and the power starts to flicker and go on and off. Primary power systems are going down. I've rerouted the secondary generators. Inform the bridge, Mr. Data, with me. And then they get in the turbo lift. And Picard and Data are discussing the situation. Picard gets in and goes, Bridge, Commander, do you have any suggestions on how we would encourage the parasites to leave the ship once we reach the field? If we configure a particle beam with a high concentration of nitrium and project it toward one of the asteroids, then they would follow the beam like a trail of breadcrumbs. Very well. And then there's gloop in the turbolift, and the turbolift stops. And they eventually do make it to the bridge. And then there's problems on the bridge, too. So then there's a lot of conversation up on the bridge. They've dropped to warp 5, and Geordi says that's probably what they're best going to maintain. So Picard goes to Data and says, we're probably all going to end up passing out for the lack of oxygen and life support systems and everything else. And it's up to Data to fix the once they arrive to the asteroid belt, to divert the power to. All right, let me go through it to read it properly. If we maintain our current speed, 2 hours, 23 minutes, sir. Mr. Data, the rest of us may lose consciousness. If we do, it may be your job to execute the plan as discussed. Aye, sir. And then they end up at the place, and the computer's structural integrity of the lithium chamber is at 34%. Estimated breaches in 1 minute. Computer, transfer power from warp engines to life support. Transfer complete. Data says activate Bussard collector. Activated. Breach of the lithium chamber in 40 seconds. Data says reconfigure the hydrogen plasma mixture to include 30% deuterium. Mixture complete. Data says project emitter beam 024 mark 041. And they shoot the beam out, and it goes out, and all the nitrium and that little thing goes with them. Let me see if I can find it. So he sends the beam out, and when the beam goes out, all the particles go with it. Into the asteroid belt, or whatever it was. And Picard congratulates Data on a job well done, and he has Worf check in with Dr. Crusher on casualties, any injuries, stuff like that. And now they've got a wedding to go to. But first, we have our first captain's overview. Captain's log, stardate 457336. Temporary repairs to the ship have been completed. Our attention now turns to matters of more festive nature. And we go to 10 forward. So the Ergo guy's waiting at the door. Everything's all decorated. The guests are all waiting. They're all there. And Riker, you hear Riker in the background going, you'd think she'd at least get to her own wedding on time, is what Riker says. The door opens, and Mr. Hum smiles as Lwaxana walks in. So Lwaxana walks in completely naked, and everybody's just eyes are falling out of their head. Even Alexander's eyes are coming out, and I don't think it was appropriate for him to be in this scene, but they included him in this scene. And I was kept waiting for Worf's hand to go like this, but they didn't have time. They just cut the scene. And Campo walks out and decides he's not going to marry Lwaxana, and she gets her wish because she didn't want to marry him either. Alexander's getting a full view. They're like, no, they don't think so. They're leaving. So we finished the episode with Lwaxana in the bath. Alexander is in the thing too. Troy is in the bath too. And Worf is in the bath too. She says, heavenly, every pore of my body tingles with contentment. Isn't it wonderful how things worked out, Alexander? I wanted to teach you how to grab the joys of living, and you turned around and taught me not to let go of them. How very mutual. Joyce said, we still have to learn how to live in the real world, Mother, all of us. Lwaxana says, she's absolutely right, Alexander, but only when necessary. Worf, you're just supposed to sit here? And that's how the episode ends. And that was the cost of living. I hope you will tune in next week for next week's episode. We have done the Outcast, the Cause and Effect, First Try, and Cost of Living. We have finished the disc, and we are moving on to I think the final disc, or maybe disc 6 of the season at least. Hold on 1 second. So I hope you will join me next week for The Perfect Mate, the week after The Imaginary Friend, Borg, and the next phase. So season 5, disc 6 will be starting next week. Thank you so much. Please hit the like and subscribe. Have a good one.